we have to start to prepare our species to the social acceptance of living longer. One of the most important things for me is the quality of life. It's not only the time, how much, but can you live with a great quality for 80 years?
Hello and welcome to the Live Long and Master Aging podcast. I'm Peter Bowes. This is where we explore the science and stories behind human longevity. Now, for this and more episodes over the next few months, I'm happy to announce that the Llama podcast is joining forces with Amazentis, a Swiss life science company that's pioneering cutting-edge, clinically validated cellular nutrition under its Timeline brand. This will be a partnership for a series of episodes exploring the research behind cellular nutrition, why it matters for our longevity, and also finding out more about the scientists making it happen. Today I'm joined by Professor Patrick Aebischer, the chairman and co-founder of Amazentis. Patrick is a medical doctor and a neuroscientist, a long-time researcher and author. Dr. Aebischer, welcome to the Live Long and Master Aging podcast.
Hello. Good to be here with you.
It's very good to talk to you. We're all living, aren't we, through extremely uncertain times at the moment, trying to move forward with whatever it is we do the best we can. And I'm curious, how are you coping with this? I suppose we could call it the new normal. There's nothing normal about it, though, is there?
Like everybody else, trying to do the best out of this time, trying to enjoy time for reading, a bit confined, but also I'm personally very much interested in the outcome, and I'm working quite a bit on the pandemic, on the development of vaccines, like everybody else, trying to contribute to a good solution to this very difficult problem that we're going to have to live with.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. And you were working in terms of looking at a vaccine. And of course, it is the number one question that everyone has in terms of when there may be a vaccine and what sort of progress is being made.
I think it's encouraging, given this short amount of time that science had to come up with a vaccine. As you know, there are various types of vaccine. All this is new because the old way to produce vaccine would take much longer. So there are new technology that have been developed that can accelerate this. But we first have to see if the vaccine is, functional. Is it safe? Can we scale it up? And can we distribute it, which is quite of a challenge, to nearly 8 billion people. So, those are enormous challenges, but I think I've never seen the science trying to really find a solution in such a small amount of time, and really with a real collaboration, at least on the scientific aspects of things.
And it is almost a unique situation, isn't it? You mentioned the collaboration. I don't think I've seen anything quite like this. This is a global collaboration, clearly a global pandemic that we're all facing, but this really is laboratories around the world pulling together in a way that we probably haven't seen before.
It's the first time. When you think about it, the outbreak, beginning of the year, and we're already now in phase 3 clinical trials with at least 4 different vaccines. This was just unthinkable. So we have, the tool, but also the will to find, at least on the scientific community, a solution, because nobody can hide from this problem. Depending if you're poor, rich, extremely rich, we're all the same. We're humans, and we have to face with this little nanoparticles that is really challenging our species.
And I think it's also put the spotlight, perhaps more than ever before, on the importance of taking care of our general health. And maybe this comes to the point that we're going to be talking about in terms of your work with Amazentis and our own personal health span and longevity. And we've heard so much, of course, about people with underlying health conditions suffering far worse than others with COVID-19. And if only, I guess, all of us were in a better state of health, then perhaps there may not have been as many people dying from a virus like this. It really does show the importance of those basic things of exercise and good nutrition.
That's for sure, but also, and we see the importance of aging well to some extent. We know, the aged population is more susceptible for a lot of different reasons because they are, affected by various disease and makes them weaker towards the virus. So to some extent, we have to learn to live not only longer but better, in better health. And I think this is also one of the mission of the new science coming, and that's where Amazentis wants also to try to contribute.
Well, that's what I find so fascinating, and let's talk about that. And for full disclosure, as I mentioned at the start, this podcast is now a collaboration with Amazentis. Very happy to do that. One of my goals is to help people understand the work that scientists are doing, and I guess from your perspective, explaining your work as a scientist to people, to the masses, to people in huge numbers, is a crucial element of what you need to do.
Yeah, and I think scientists have a responsibility, to say what we do, to, advance the science so as to, enhance our capability, our well-being, but at the same time to be truthful and not overpromise things. And certainly when you talk about aging, we have to be modest about it. But I think, yes, we have made tremendous progress when you look at, we speak about the revolution of IT, of information technology, of biotechnology, but probably the biggest revolution we've ever seen is the fact that we have double life expectancy over 4 generations. For our species, this is just incredible. If we would have told our great-great-grandparents that we would live twice as long as they would have thought. And I think we're probably on the way because we start to understand the molecular basis of the aging process to be able to, in fact, not make us eternal, but, gain a couple of generations is something that you could imagine. But it goes also with a lot of social responsibility because, we use, as a species, we used to live over 3 generations. We're starting to live over 4 generations. But what will it be, to live maybe over 5 or 6 generations? So yes, the science is moving. We have to start to prepare our species also to the social acceptance of living longer. And for this, one of the most important things for me is the quality of life. It's not only the time, how much, but can you live with a great quality for 80 years? That was nearly unthinkable, 4 generations ago. I am personally 65 now, but I don't feel like an old man, so at all. But probably my great-great-grandparent was feeling a really old man. So we've made a tremendous progress. The key question is, can we do the same thing for another generation or 2? And that's where the science is probably at the time where we start to be able to act on it and really, have a true science-based impact on the process of aging. And meaning good aging, meaning that, you would be in good health as you were in your 40s when you were in your 80s. That's really the challenge.
Yeah, and you've really gone to the heart of the matter. And I guess the issue, as we are able to live longer, it isn't the focus on lifespan, but we want to be, as you use that phrase, not to feel like an old man, maybe at 80 years old, to continue with those healthy years, the health span as we now describe it, and then maybe a few short months where we deteriorate and finally die, but we don't have that prolonged period of ill health before we eventually die.
And that's the biggest challenge, is the quality of life. I think it makes no sense, to increase the lifespan if it is not with the quality that, we all want to. And there are a couple of things that we do care a lot. When I say what is good aging, I see 4 things. First is your mobility. You want to be independent. The second thing is cognition, of course. This is extremely important. You don't want to forget who you are and your family and so on. That means being hit by dementia. The third thing is vision for me, because this is part of our life, to be able, to continue to read, to be part of the world. And of course, hearing is also very key. And you see when people have a hearing and eyesight problem, they start, their quality of life diminishes quite significantly. So for me, those are the 4 criteria, if you think about, acting on aging, that we have to keep in mind, is mobility, cognition, hearing and vision.
And to keep in mind the fact that these different aspects of our lives, our physicality, they are indeed all connected. And people often focus, I think, on, let's say, their diet for their physical ability to walk or to run or to bend over or to lift something. But as you correctly say, our eyesight, our ability to hear, our mental capacity, all linked to how we treat our body in terms of diet and nutrition?
Yeah, that's what we learn more and more. And, there have been a lot of studies from diet and what we call the Mediterranean diet, which, you find in Greece and so on. That's where there are a lot of spots, several spots where people are known to live quite a long time, up to 100 years. The centenarians, so for example, in Greece, there's a small island in Greece, and it looks like, diet is key. And that was the whole purpose of Amazentis, to try to understand, what were the ingredients in this diet that was really acting at the cell and molecular level on the aging process. And this is a new science. We know that diet is important, but can we try to get the active component in this diet so that we could, take them as supplement? Because not everybody can live, in the southern island of Greece with the right olive oil, the right fish, and the right vegetables. And I think this was what drove Amazentis science when it was initiated.
Well, exactly. I wanted to talk to you about that and how you founded the company. It was 2007. And what was going through your mind at that stage to form a company like this? Was there a big idea in your mind?
I'm a neuroscientist. I've worked on neurodegenerative disease for all my life, mainly Parkinson and Alzheimer. And I've been on really, I would say, the high-tech part of it. And I do remember reading an article on superfruits. To be honest, I was quite skeptical because I'm the typical, molecular scientist that if you don't understand exactly the mechanism, they wouldn't. And I had a postdoc at the time that came and said, I found there is an article saying that in pomegranate, there might be something. And we had the Alzheimer mouse in a laboratory, which is a transgenic mouse that reproduces disease. And we've decided just to give some pomegranate extract to really see if what we were reading was true or not. So again, as a scientist, I was extremely skeptical. And we found some, early indication that there might be something there. And that raised my, interest. And was asking myself, can we try to deconvolute? So at first I did a lot of reading on pomegranates. It's very interesting that, it was identified already in the 15th century as the fruit of youth. So, our ancestors had identified this fruit as a very key, a part of diet that was related to kind of anti-aging. But no real science was made on it, because usually when you try to deconvolute, that means trying to find the active ingredients in something as complex as a fruit like pomegranate. It's very rare that you're able to find the molecules. Anyhow, to make a long story short, we thought it was worth it. And then we decided. I had already built 2 other biotech while I was in the States. I was for 9 years at Brown University. So I knew a bit what, biotech was, how to put a company together. And with one of my old graduate students, who is now the CEO, Chris Ridge, we decided, it was a bit crazy, but to say, why don't we try to do, because this was seen as soft science, nothing serious would come out of it. But I thought it ought to be done. So we've convinced some, major business angels to invest in our company, in this, but we had really an intuition, nothing more, to be honest. And again, it took quite some time, and, you have to be a bit lucky in science. But then we found, in fact, we were able to identify a molecule called urolithin that is not, you don't find it in the pomegranate, but if you eat pomegranate and you have the right microbiome, that means the bugs that are colonizing your guts, it transforms those tannins into this molecule. And in a very interesting way, this molecule activates what we call mitophagy. Mitophagy is the process to rejuvenate your mitochondria. And the mitochondria are the small organelles that you find in your cell that produce the energy that the cells needs, called the ATP. That's the energy of the cells. And this urolithin is able to stimulate the rejuvenation of those mitochondria. So it is not the whole process of aging, but it's certainly one very important one. Because when you age, the number of mitochondria in those cells diminish, they're less functional, and when you're able to induce again this process, you rejuvenate and produce new mitochondria that provides the cell the energy that it requires. So, but that took, to be honest, 10 years. So it's not something that, you do just in 6 months in a laboratory. And very carefully, we've looked at it first in vitro, cultivating cell, then in small little worms that we call C. elegans, then in mice, and more recently in humans.
Clearly, this is very exciting science. Just going back a little bit, I'm curious to know when you realized that there was something to this, when in those early days you looked at pomegranates, you knew the history, you knew the stories, but you didn't have any sort of scientific proof about how beneficial they could be for us. That must have been quite a light bulb moment for you in your mind, quite exciting.
Yeah, because, you found, because there's no molecule that we know that can induce this process called mitophagy, rejuvenation of mitochondria. And here were we, having identified the first molecule that could do it. And, and it came indirectly for pomegranates. But now we realize that not only pomegranates provide, but, for example, nuts, berries, and so on, contain those tannins that are, again, transformed by your gut microbiome and your bacteria into this urolithin. But what we found, which was also very surprising, is not everybody has the capacity to produce this urolithin out of those fruits. We believe now the current scientific evaluations is about a third of us have the capacity to really transform efficiently those tannins into this urolithin. But the other 2/3, we can drink and eat as much pomegranate, blueberries, nuts. We don't produce these molecules. So, and that came the idea that we needed to synthesize it. And then, of course, if you take it, if you administer it orally, then you will have the benefit of this molecule urolithin, despite the fact you have or not the right bacteria in your gut.
That's a very important point to make, isn't it? That while we talk so enthusiastically about pomegranates and perhaps other fruits as well, that not all of us can benefit.
That's right. So only a third of us, and even we've started to realize during our clinical trials, to get the amount that you need, you would, for example, have to drink between 1.5 and 2 liters of pomegranate per day. If you have the bacteria, if you don't have it, you won't produce it. And to be honest, it's quite of a challenge because, pomegranate is okay maybe for a small amount, but I don't think that there would be many people that would be able to swallow, 2 liters of pomegranate juice per day. So I think, this is also the other part of the equation. So we had to find a more efficient way to get this urolithin into our cells. And that's where we were able to produce this, to synthesize this, and you could take it as a supplement, or now we're working also in a regular pill.
The point that you make there reminds me of the beneficial or potential benefits of drinking red wine. That realistically, to get some of the known benefits from red wine, we'd have to drink a tremendous amount of it.
That's right. That was the first molecule that was discovered called resveratrol, which is an interesting molecule, much less efficient than urolithin. But however, and I love, I'm Swiss French, so I love great, good red wine. But, I think we made a calculation that we would have to drink between 8 and 10 liters per day. And I can tell you, your liver would probably not like this a lot. So I think, that's why we have to go through the supplement route if we want, to benefit from those molecules. And that's why you need biotech companies, identifying the active component and providing them in a way that is easy, to take on a daily basis.
And what you're talking about now is an extremely pure form of urolithin A.
That's right. It's like a normal drug. So it's a chemical molecule, with a little bit of excipients and so on, so you could swallow, or we put it in the supplement, so that it's also a nice experience. Because, as we do this, we didn't want this to be a drug like this, but it should be a real experience. Now, of course, I am in Switzerland where we've started, the Nespresso, for example, coffee, the way to do it. So it should be, a nice way for me, it's associating, something nice to take while benefiting. Usually drugs are, not that nice to take. We take them, we swallow them. But for us, the idea was, can we try to provide, the pleasure of something to take that is good for you? Because often when you take things that you like are not necessarily good for you, or at moderate level, but obviously you shouldn't, exaggerate. So for us, in the philosophy of Amazentis, that's also very important, is the experience, to have pleasure with the experience of taking a molecule that is good for you.
And in Amazentis terms, this is what you call Mitopure.
That's right. That's the name that we gave to the urolithin. Urolithin is the chemical definition, and Mitopure is the brand of the molecule, because this was the first time that it was identified, and it will be now present in the various ways. It could be a supplement, it could be a smoothie, it could be a pill, and some people prefer to take it with pills. I don't, tend to like to swallow pills. I'd rather have a pleasure of putting something in a nice yogurt or in a smoothie. So again, I have the impression that it's good for me, but it's good for me for the long term. It's good for me now because I enjoy taking it.
And do the beneficial effects, are they immediately obvious to people, or this is more likely clearly something that's going to take time? We are talking about longevity benefits after all, that perhaps you take the supplement today, you're not going to necessarily notice anything tomorrow.
That's right. So, and certainly not it takes time to see if we will have an effect on longevity for our species. But I think and that's why we've concentrated our clinical trial in trying to see if something could be seen and could be measured at a reasonable amount of time. And one of the first things, that degenerates while we age is the muscle. We lose muscle strength, so we tend to not walk as much. So, and our first clinical trials were really geared at trying to quantify if by taking this molecules, we can increase, the muscle activity, which is related to mobility. And that's what the first clinical trials have shown, is we're increasing what we call the 6-minute walk. And you calculate how much, a walk you could do in 6 minutes, and you could see. So that will not take, 2 hours, but over several weeks, we see already an effect on your mobility, on your capacity, to walk. And I think this is very important. So we also probably think that it has also an effect on cognition and so on, but that would take time to see. But what we're doing, we have really an anti-aging molecule. There will be several of them, because there are several ways to tackle the problem. But first is, this energy will be provided to all your cells. So the easiest to evaluate is the muscle function. It's easier to look at the cognitive, but I'm totally convinced that it's probably also very good for your cognitive function, because we know in the brain, I'm a neuroscientist, that of course the brain is affected, the same way. And the brain needs a lot of energy. In fact, it's the organ that, consumes the most. So I think it will also, and of course for hearing, for vision, because it's a whole process. So probably all your cells need to have more energy while we age, or go back to normal energy. But the one that are the easiest to evaluate, we thought, was the muscle, and mobility.
And that is why I make the connection to longevity, perhaps on an individual basis, because frailty is often the beginning of the end for so many people. I mean, quite simply falling over because older people don't have that muscular strength anymore that could ultimately lead to the end of their lives, and perhaps a premature end of their life.
It's exactly, that's one of the key things, is you don't have the same strength, you tend to fall, you break your hip, you go to the hospital, and then you start, it's very difficult to recuperate, and this is the beginning of the end. So I think having, muscle strength is key in your ability to move and to move safely. And that's why we put a lot of emphasis in this first component, because you can quantify it, but also we know in terms of the quality of life, it's an essential component. And of course, your ability to move gives you the independence that we all enjoy. as long as we can. And I think that's why this was the first thing that we want to prove scientifically, that this urolithin can really do something on your muscle function.
Just going back to when you formed the company, which you called Amazentis, was there a reason for that word? Can you explain why you gave the company that title?
Yeah, at the time, because, people spoke a lot about superfruits. So, you say pomegranate is one of them, but there are a lot of very interesting fruits that you find in the Amazon, acai and so on. So people have looked, and there are a lot of smoothie that are now given. Unfortunately, they don't have the science behind, but we know that a lot of those fruits grow into nature, into the Amazon. So we were inspired by the Amazon. And at the time, I had done a trip in the Amazon and saw a couple of those fruits that I have never seen before. I said, maybe there are some very interesting new fruits that have a new molecule that we would be interested to try to find. And that's where the word Amazentis came, even though now we have concentrated our work on the pomegranate, but I think in the future it's very much thinkable, at least I am interested, to look beyond pomegranates. Can we identify other molecules that have also, a synergistic effect on slowing down the aging process?
That's fascinating. You have had a very varied career, haven't you? You're a neuroscientist by training. You're a medical doctor. You're now working in, amongst other things, cellular biology. You are a strong proponent and advocate for a multidisciplinary approach.
Yes, and I've always been, I was trained as a medical doctor, but in neuroscience you're very much exposed to a lot of technology, engineering. It has a system levels. It goes from robotics to artificial intelligence, and I was always fascinated by the convergence of technologies. And I'm very curious by nature, and I'm not afraid of looking at a new concept, but I'm very, very keen on doing it, the deep scientific way. And I think that was one of the motto. It's one of the motto of Amazentis, is to keep the quality of the science. It has to be science, based and clinically proven. And this is, for us, the real part of it. And I can only do this because I'm a scientist. And then I run a university. I was president of one of the big two Institute of Technology in Switzerland. And before, as I told you, I was at Brown University on the faculty of neuroscience. So, how scientists work, it's by evidence, and the quality of what you do is key. I could never promote something I don't believe in. We wouldn't have proven scientifically. So for me, this, of course, that would, affect my reputation. And I've worked for 60 years, so I would have never done this without the kind of rigor that we've put. For example, in the clinical trials, we run what we call double blind. And the same way you test a new drug. That means you have people, that take it, but the evaluator, neither the person that takes it nor the evaluator knows if you are on the active component or just a placebo that doesn't have the active compound. And this is the way of science. And this is, by the way, the same way that we're now testing new components for the COVID. And this is this kind of, for me, the scientific rigor was key. And it's key, it's at the heart of Amazentis philosophy.
And that scientific rigor, I think, is more important today. It's always been important, but it's more important today than ever before when we live in this world of so-called, and I hate the expression, but fake news, when people can look at the internet and not quite know what to believe.
And that's really the real problem, because you can see everything. And we said at the end, it's the reputation. So the whole idea that we're scientists. I was trained as a medical doctor, so this has to go to a certain way. That's the way we prove that something is efficient or not. And for me, it is unthinkable to do it a different way. So I think in all this kind of, there's a lot of charlatan things and so on. So for us, it's to go back. Yes, by the way, there are components in fruits, in natural. By the way, a lot of the drugs are developed, from natural compounds. But I think the way to do it is so important. And I think that's the whole thing that we want to do it, and that's why we've put so much emphasis. It took a lot of time and resources to prove it. But hopefully, this would be accepted by the medical community because this was proven by the regular ways that science move. And for us, I think for the whole team, this is the way. It's the only way we could do it. And for me, when you're talking about aging, it's very important. It would be criminal to promise things that we don't have. So yes, and I'm convinced that this molecule has an effect. For how long, for a thing, we don't know yet. But now, for the first time, we have a molecule that really has a real impact on the aging. Now, I don't know it's going to give you 5, 10 years. Only time will say. But this is a new science that is coming, and I think we have to do it with the same rigor as we do it for the general, I would say, pharma development.
That's almost the irony of longevity research, isn't it? You say only time will tell to some extent in terms of the long-term benefits, and that's just the very nature of studying aging.
That's right. But at the same time, you could try to find surrogate, if we can show that, like we did, that by taking this, if you suffer from frailty, and you could do 300 meters over 6 minutes, but by taking this molecule, you go to 4 or 450, you've proven that you've had, that you were able to reverse at least one component of your aging process. Now, and knowing that this molecule acts on all your mitochondria and all your cells, you could deduct that it's probably also good for cognition. And that will take time to prove, and what Amazentis will do, is that this molecule is also active in cognition. But at least on one aspect, we have something very firm, and that's why we've chosen the muscle function, because it's useful. It's a real, good indicator of your aging. But on this one, you don't have to wait 20 years to see if it has an effect or not.
You mentioned that you worked here in the United States at Brown University, and I'm just curious what you learned from the American way of doing things, and perhaps the American psyche, I think, must have been quite different to what you were used to.
Yeah, I came as a naive postdoc, a Swiss postdoc to the United States, I was given the possibility, because I came with a grant from the Swiss National Science Foundation, to go to Harvard, to MIT. But I always liked good place, but that maybe smaller, that you had a little more freedom to do whatever you wanted. And Brown was the perfect place. It's a liberal college university of great quality in a great place, Providence, that I really enjoyed. And it was the land of opportunity. I came as a postdoc, and I guess 6 years after I was already a tenured professor, and I was the chairman of a department. This is unthinkable in Europe. So there's this kind of, the sky is the limit, which is fantastic. In fact, the first company I did, I do remember so vividly, it was on a Friday evening. Somebody knocked at my door, and I saw a person coming in, telling me, I've read a lot of things you do. I want to do a company with you. And I said, what? I didn't know what he was talking about. In fact, the gentleman called Mark Levin is one of the great venture capitalists now in the United States. Started a big fund called Third Rock Venture in Boston. And that was his first company that he was doing. So I've learned by osmosis. I had no clue. And 5 years after, we were on the NASDAQ for an IPO. So I had a crash course. This would have been unthinkable in Europe, certainly at the time. But this is the wonderful thing about the U.S. Everything is possible. And that's what I love. So I owe a lot to the United States, about, not being afraid if you have something that you think is important to try to make it. And that's what I've learned.
Me too. I've lived in California since 1996 and noticed and appreciate exactly what you're talking about, that sort of ethos of that can-do mentality, and that if you think you can't do it, well, actually, if you try again, you probably can do it, or there's someone who's prepared to collaborate with you to make something happen.
That's right. And forgiveness if you didn't succeed the first time, this is, I was lucky enough because, it worked. So we did an IPO and so on. But, I think, and that's what I tried to bring back to Switzerland, because I love, this is my country, those are my roots and so on. But I think we were rather timid. I think we've learned, and I think that's, something so key about, specifically if you're young and ambitious and have ideas, you don't have to wait for your boss to retire to do something. The U.S. allows you, you give freedom to young in the academic system to young, and you have to prove, you're going to have you yourself by yourself. let's prove me that you could do it and you could be promoted. And that's why, in no time, if I would have been told that 6 years after I was chairman of the department of an Ivy League school, I would have never thought. It's unthinkable. But that's why this land of opportunity that, and this ability to accept, and I hope, foreigners, to integrate them and so on. I just hope that this will continue over time. But that's a different issue.
Yeah. Do you, I certainly believe this, that thanks to the internet, which clearly wasn't around in your early years and mine either, that it has made the world a smaller place in many senses. It is easier, like you and I right now are communicating. We can see each other actually as we're recording this interview, which would have been unthinkable 20 or 30 years ago. It is a smaller place, and perhaps some of that can-do attitude of America is maybe filtering through a little faster to other parts of the world.
Yes, and I think very much so. We're becoming, as we say, a small village. And I think this is very obvious these days. And during the COVID crisis, we were able to continue to interact, to work with our colleagues around the world, which would have been unthinkable. But without this, how we were writing letters at the time. It would have been just impossible. So this is the beauty of what technology can bring you today. But at the same time, as a neuroscientist, our brain is changing. It's an evolution. The human species is not a fixed species, so it evolved with time. But again, we owe a lot, to the United States. It was interesting at the before the World War. It was Germany, Europe, and then the leadership came to the U.S. God knows, science. I always say that science was. Communication of science before the First World War was done in German. Now it's in English. Maybe in 50 years it'll be in Chinese. I don't know. But the world is evolving. But I think because of this, and I think the COVID crisis is a good example. Despite of the politics, the scientists work together because we have a common language in science. That's what is so beautiful about science, because the law of physics are the same in Beijing, San Francisco, or Geneva. And I think we're starting with those tools to share a community, but also a responsibility as scientists, because science has never been as fast, probably, as now. But also we have responsibilities about the application. So even in the field that we work on aging, of course, it'd be fantastic if you could slow down dementia, Alzheimer, and so on. But also we have to be careful that we don't produce people that have lost their minds and live at the expense of society. So I think there's a responsibility of science that is coming over the years that is very important. But that's why it's so fascinating. And I think we have to learn also to speak about that, to express our doubts, our hopes, and share it. Because otherwise, society will not follow. I'm still, flabbergasted that there's so many people that are against vaccines, that are creationist. That means as a scientist, we were not able to communicate. So we have to learn how to do this, even in the fields, and not overpromise things, but really come up with the rigor of what we think, which has been until now the best way to do it, which is the reproducible experimentation paradigm that scientists have developed over the centuries.
And with Amazentis, that's exactly what you've been doing for these past few years, that rigorous scientific process. And clearly in 2019, with the publication of the first human clinical trials, that was a pivotal point for the company. And you really are now at quite a key point moving forward. You might have been delayed a little bit because of COVID, as everyone has with just about everything we do. But the next few months are going to be quite interesting, aren't they?
That's right. Yeah, we first published the thing in the top journals in the Nature family. So because we want to have this rigor, now we also had to, because I think it's important, the pleasure part of the experience is important. We've packaged the way that it does look like a drug that we would have, to swallow painfully. And now, of course, this is the time. But again, we can start to do this despite COVID because, we can do the kind of thing. We can talk throughout the world. We will start in the United States because, also I think this is an important market for those kind of things. It's also an important that the FDA, was involved in the process, that we also want to have, the rigor. to saying this needs to be safe. This is probably the first and most important thing. So, and we're hopeful that hopefully people will see the effect, because we strongly believe that we can help people. Because at the end, you want to help people, as we've said, to live a good life as long as possible. So, to increase the quality of life, so that the experience while we're on this earth is an enjoyable one.
And you mentioned the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. Maybe just for listeners to this around the world, explain the significance of the FDA being involved.
Now, of course, because, the FDA protects, the consumers from, false claim, and also, things that could be dangerous for your health. So for us, it was very important to go what we call the grassroots general regard of safe. That means we've sent a dossier to the Food and Drug Administration, so to ask them, if they thought we could proceed with this. The FDA has looked at it and think that this is safe. This is extremely important for us because, of course, primum non nocere, first you don't harm. That's what we say in medicine. And for us, it was extremely important to have this kind of, label, and then been overseen of the, FDA. And we would do the same thing in EMEA, which is the correspondent of the FDA in Europe, to do it. So we're going to work. We're very ambitious. We want, this product to be bought by people because we believe it's a good one that would help them. But we will want to do it again the same way, with the rigor that we want even from the regulatory agencies. So for us, it would unthinkable not to work very closely with the FDA to promote our product.
Let me just ask you in closing, and I often ask scientists this same question really, looking at your body of work throughout your career and everything that you've learned, what is it that you apply to yourself and your own way of life now with your own longevity or your own health span in mind? If there was something that you could pinpoint and say, yes, I know that, and I know that to be crucial, and it's something that I live by every day, what is it?
No, it's funny because through the COVID, also, while I was president of university, you have a very busy life. It's hard to do exercise, the amount of that. So now I had a little more time. So I've started really to exercise, 2 hours a day by just walking, because we have the pleasure to live in a gorgeous scenery and so on. So, and to think, because, this is a great thing I've never had before, is the diet. I'm trying to now be much more respectful, but also it's difficult, to respect everything. So being helped by a molecule like urolithin is key. And that's why, to be very honest, I was very keen, and I've been now there for nearly 3 months on urolithin. So, I walk the talk. For me, it's very important that, because I truly believe in this molecule. So for me, it was very important to be the first customer. But I found this also a pleasure. And of course, for us, it's wonderful because, this is the results of 30 years of studies, from when I've started as a medical doctor, as a neuroscientist, because we haven't proven yet in neuroscience, but I am hopeful that we will see also an effect on cognition. And of course, as you age, to be honest, the most precious thing that I have, that we probably all have, is our brain. But seeing the effect in humans on the muscle, I'm even more keen about taking this to try to protect my brain. And I have nothing to lose because I know that this molecule is extremely safe.
And looking forward, I often wonder why people aspire to reach not necessarily a super great age, but we talk a lot about health span, maybe from a spiritual perspective, apart from the physicality of being healthy when you're older, which we've talked about, but just being an older person and still being aware, still being connected, still being involved in life. Is there something, again, that you can pinpoint that you aspire to?
Yeah, and I think, of course, you want to, I'm the son of an artist, and my father, lived until he was 90 years old, but and he was a painter. And, artists are wonderful because they don't retire at 65. They continue. And what is the most probably important part of our brain is our creativity. And when you look even in the history of music and so on, you look at Richard Strauss or painting and so on, you have a lot of, some of the most important pieces of work were often done when those artists were very old. So I think this part of it, and the most precious part of it, is our creativity, because it expresses who we are as human beings. And for me, that's probably the most important thing, is to keep this enthusiasm for life, this creativity, this ability to contribute. And of course, for this, you have to have good cognition. You have, again, to have good mobility. It's better, to have good hearing, even though Beethoven, while he was deaf, was still able, but he was a genius. And Degas, Pater was able to sculpture while he lost his vision. But those are exceptional people. For more regular people like us, I think as much as you have the sense to have a life that is meaningful, the better it's going to be. And of course, that's why, if we could contribute a little bit to that, I will have the impression that we did something useful.
Patrick Aebischer, this has been a hugely enjoyable conversation. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And over the coming weeks, we'll be hearing from some of the other researchers who are looking at this fascinating field of science. We'll also explore more about the science behind Mitopure, the pure form of urolithin A. We'll hear some of the scientists who've spent much of their lives working to understand the importance of mitochondrial health and muscle strength as we age. And if you'd like to read more about Dr. Aebischer's work, I'll put some details into the show notes for this episode, and you'll find those at our website, lamapodcast.com, Lama being our acronym, Live Long and Master Aging. This episode of the Lama Podcast was brought to you in association with Amazentis, a Swiss life science company that's pioneering cutting-edge, clinically validated cellular nutrition under its Timeline brand. And if you enjoy what we do, you can rate and review us at Apple Podcasts. You can follow us in social media at Lama Podcast, and you can direct message me at Peter Bowes. Many thanks for listening.